It's ad break time. I'm proud to announce that the Beyond Solitaire podcast is sponsored by Central Michigan University's Center for Learning Through Games and Simulations. And as usual, they have exciting projects coming up. First, they have a spring course called Deep Dive by Doing, taught by none other than Kathleen Mercury. She is a very experienced teacher and specifically an expert at teaching game design. So if you take her class, you'll be in very good hands. The course starts February 3rd, so register soon. There is a link in the show notes. Also, CLGS has a springtime crowdfunding project on the way. They'll be publishing a revised edition of Jason Morningstar's The Blue Way, a role-playing game about the stories of cultures being assimilated into a larger empire. You'll be learning more about that one soon on this very podcast. For now, though, let's get on with the show. Hey, gamers, it's Liz Davids from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm back for season 12 of the Beyond Solitaire podcast, and I have a very special guest. This is Toma of Meeple Foundry. How are you doing today, Deanna?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you. So, for people who don't know what Meeple Foundry encompasses as a business, could you give us just the rundown of what y'all do collectively?
Yes. So some people call us a studio, a board game studio, and they call it that way because we provide different services. We sometimes don't like to call it ourselves a studio because we feel that will make like a sort of distance. You know, we seem bigger than what we want to seem, and we do like to be close to the people that we end up working with. So yes, let's say that we are a studio. Now, at the moment, it's five of us. And what we do is we give different sort of services related to board games. So when we started, it was just translation and graphic adaptation. And now we do much more than that. So we do also graphic design, we do artwork, so illustration, and then we also do 3D. So it's all different people specialized in different areas. So we work as a team to give, different sort of services for board games.
What made you and Samu decide to start this project?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a funny story, sort of. I'm a translator, professional translator. That's what I studied. And Samu has been a graphic designer for many years. And back in the day, we moved in together. This was in 2018. And we love board games. And he's a graphic designer. I'm a translator. So we found out a few games that we really liked, and they were not translated into Spanish. So yes, I do speak, of course, English, so I could play it in English, but Samu would rather prefer to play it in Spanish. So we approached the company, and it was a really big company, and we said, "Oh, we're really big fans of your games. Is there any way that we can help you out with doing just a, let's say, a fan base, but at the same time professional translation for you and graphic adaptation, and then you can just post that on BGG," just because we were fans. And they said, "Oh no, this is not something that we accept. If it's not in our plans, we're not going to accept anything." And actually on their webpage they had like a statement saying, "Oh, if you have a prototype, don't write to us because we don't accept anything." So it was a bit strange because we thought that was something interesting, but then it kind of, spiced us up a bit. And then we thought, what if we try to do this in a good way, like in a professional way? I mean, we are professionals. We have been doing this in our industries. Why don't we do it for an industry that we love, which is board games? So we reached out to other publishers, and there was a good response. And that's how we founded Meeple Foundry. We said, okay, let's do it. I think there is something here. So, so that's how it started.
That's amazing. So I feel like being a translator must be a very interesting and difficult job. So, what made you decide that you wanted to translate as a profession?
In fact, and to be fair, when I studied, I wanted to be an interpreter, not a translator, because
Ooh.
I wanted to. For me, it was much more dynamic. I was quite good at it, at simultaneous interpreting and all those different areas that it's there. And I didn't want to be a translator actually, because for me it was a bit boring, just sitting down. But at the end of the day, I kind of mixed up, let's say, the board games with the sort of hunger that I had for people, and then the translation, because at different events and conventions and so on, I would kind of recharge my batteries with all the needed that I had from being with people. And then doing the translation made me closer to them because I was doing something that they could use. So it was actually, a smooth transition, sort of. But it was never in my plan when I used to study translation. It was never in my plan to become like 8 hours a day translator, actually.
That's interesting. How many languages do you speak? I'm just curious now because in America we're not as multilingual as people in Europe, so I'm always jealous.
I speak five. Samu says that I speak four and a half because the fifth one is not perfect, which is German. I don't speak German that well, so he says I speak four and a half. I'd rather say I speak five because if I have some trouble in Germany, I can get myself out.
That counts to me. I'm just gonna say. So when you are translating a board game, what
Mhm.
are some aspects of that kind of translation that are different from translating, say, like a book or a newspaper article or even something that somebody has said? Like, what are some like special tricks to working with board games specifically in your profession?
I think the most important thing is terminology. There is certain terminology that works in board games that in their, let's say, real world is not really like that. So we always say, a really easy example. It's going to be a bit difficult maybe now to translate it in English because the cleaning phase, right, in board games. If you would translate that to cleaning as properly in Spanish, that would be phase of cleaning, right? So that would be limpieza in Spanish. But actually, in the Spanish board games, when you look at the rule books and how people talk about it and how you do it like properly, is a maintenance phase. So if you can never translate it as the cleaning phase, as the word of cleaning in Spanish, it needs to be mantenimiento, which is maintenance, right? So just something that simple. If you do it wrong, you will mess up because then people will start reading the rule book and they're like, what is this? They will understand it, but it's not correct. So the most difficult part is that in order for you to translate board games, you need to play. You need to know the industry, the terminology, the terms that are used, how people basically understand the rule book. So you need to put yourself in the like reader mindset, and sometimes with an article, or I don't know, with a prospect, or with I don't know, like an instruction booklet for, I don't know, a microwave or whatever. You don't really need to put yourself, because that's very technical and that's straight to the point. And with a book, maybe you need to be a bit more creative to make it a bit more beautiful. But in board games, you really need to know how the people that are going to read that will perceive it, and the way you explain the sentences. Because sometimes in Spanish, they're constructed the other way around than in English. So,
Interesting. So, translation is partially like about, I mean, we say like a microwave manual, right? It's very straightforward. But, when I translated dead languages, it's always like translation is partially knowing what the words mean and it's partially interpretation. So, what kinds of rule books, I mean, I guess, do you like to translate? Is it different if it has a lot of flavor text and storytelling versus a rule book that's just kind of very like, this is what you do?
what I like, you mean, what I
Yeah.
prefer?
Yeah.
Well, I think I prefer going straight to the point and explaining the rules, because having some like really heavy flavor text, it takes a lot of time, and that's already a different sort of specialization, let's say, within translation. So, for example, when I did Tainted Grail, that was actually my first project as a translator, so that was like a huge one. that was that was quite difficult because it had a lot of like flavor text. It was more like a book, like a novel, right? And then you had, of course, the board game. So sometimes in those games that have so much flavor text, or actually so much, let's say, character, the text has character. It's a bit difficult because you need to kind of switch from creative to technical, and then to creative again, and to technical, and make sure that on the technical side you maintain the same terms and the same sort of construction, the building of the sentences, it's kept the same. So I think, for me, I would rather prefer just to going straight to the point. If you have some flavor text on some cards or curiosities or things like that, that's different, because it doesn't take you outside, of the proper translation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. How do you choose your projects?
Well, I think it's a matter of what it comes to us. Nowadays, I don't translate that much anymore, because I've kind of, as we progressed as a team, I've kind of switched to doing more the, let's say, project management between the international clients and then the rest of our team members. So I don't translate that much. Back in the day, it was a mix of what we used to get, the time frames that we had, and what I wanted as a theme, for board games. But
Yeah.
nowadays, it's not that much a matter of choosing the translation, because I don't translate that much. So
Interesting. Has that been, I mean, that's a sign of growth for Meeple Foundry, so that's very
yeah,
good. But do you miss it, or do you like doing the project management role better?
I think I enjoy much more the project management. Yeah, because I come back to that interaction that I mentioned before, and that's what I like. I like, discussing with the people and seeing what they want and trying to find the best solution for their problems. And problems, I mean, what the game needs, and that's what I like to do, rather, and then do all those sort of filtering from the client to what they require from us, and then how I translate that to the colleagues that I have. So then, for example, Carlos, which I know you've interviewed before, of course, then he can just focus on doing the job that he's required to do. So I'm kind of like the filter between the client and the rest of my colleagues most
Yeah.
times when it comes to illustration, and I like doing that. And I like going to the conventions and being the first point of contact, and that sort of relationship aspect of it, I think I enjoyed more. Yeah.
Nice. So speaking of conventions, we were just chatting before this. You are hopefully going to be at UK Games Expo this year, and you've got some big plans. So
Yes, last year we didn't manage to go. We had some sort of alignment with other events, and we didn't manage to travel to the UK Games Expo. We have been going for 5 years in a row now, except for last year. And the year before, we had, of course, planned for last year to do a talk. And that was something really interesting, and I was kind of sad that I couldn't do it. So if everything goes well, I will be doing a talk at the UK Games Expo this year.
nice. And what's the topic?
It's actually from what we talked before. So from the start of the project until the end of it. So all the steps that it goes through. So from a prototype, actually, because that's not an aspect that we cover. So we need to have that. So from a prototype to the final product. Yeah. So all the steps and all the people intervening and all the technical parts, like doing the files in a certain way, and all the artistic aspects and everything. So that's how the speech is planned, the talk is planned.
Nice. So you work with Samu, and who's your first partner. Of course, y'all have added since then. But this may be more of a question for him, but I think you can give the basic answer. So when you mention graphics localization as opposed to just graphic design, what is
Hmm.
the difference between those two things? And what makes graphics localization like a special part of graphic
Actually,
design?
that's the simpler one.
Okay.
So doing the localization is simple because what you get is you get a product in a language that already exists, let's say in English, right? So a game that has already been published or maybe will be, and everything is ready for you. So you just receive the files that everything is put into place. So the rule book is constructed with whatever number of pages and the board and the cards and so on. Maybe not all components have language dependency, but then you receive that. You have the translation so that I can either do myself or somebody else does that. And then what you need to do is put, let's just say, plain word text into the files that you have received, which are generally done on InDesign. So what you need to do is simply, let's say simply, kind of take the text and make it into the other language version, which in our case was most of the time Spanish. When it comes to graphic design, everything is empty. So you have nothing. So you have just a prototype. And in the case of the rulebook, that's going to probably be coming in just a Word plain a bunch of pages of word, and then the cards is more or less the same. Sometimes in the prototype some designers, they do maybe some illustration that they've taken as inspiration from the internet, so maybe you have some guidance but you have nothing more than that. So you need to create all the iconography, you need to bear in mind all the user experience, where to place what, how the cards, if you have cards, how, if they're in hand or if they're on the board or if they go on top of each other, and how you make a sort of hierarchy on how you display all the information that needs to go on the card, what needs to be bigger, what needs to be smaller, and then on the rule book all the examples. So basically graphic design is doing everything on a blank space, on a blank canvas, and graphic adaptation is you take the job that somebody has done and you simply put a new language into it. Sometimes you will need to adjust, of course, some spaces, because in the case of Spanish, that's larger than English, for example, when it's written. It's always larger, so you need to adapt things a little bit, but it's much simpler.
Interesting. So, we just kind of talked about getting like a blank prototype and a rule book with a bunch of words. I think people who are designing games, especially new designers, want to know like how far along should I try to make my work graphically? Do I need to
Mhm.
have pretty pictures of my prototype? Do I need to have like fancy like art, even if it's just going to get redone by the publisher? How do
Mhm.
you feel about that stuff as somebody who is receiving the prototype and then putting your work on it?
Mhm. It doesn't need to be fancy. It needs to be useful. So I think that's the most important. What you need to think of, if you are the designer, what you need to think of is who's going to receive my prototype? Will they understand what I've given them without me explaining it to them? So you don't need to have beautiful artwork. You don't need to hire like an artist, but do things how you think they will be well understood, because you have probably done a million of testings with that. You have probably experienced and have switched things from place to place and numbers and iconography maybe. So do something that if a person takes that, if they start reading the rule book and then with the rest of components, they could already start playing that. Yeah, so it's not a matter of being fancy, it's a matter of being useful.
What about for rule books?
For rulebooks, something that it's not that frequently found, and that is something that someone needs to generally do, is because he receives a rulebook that's just, let's say, I don't know, 12 pages, 15 pages, 20 pages, and it's just, title, subtitle, and then text, and that's it. But what he always needs to do is he takes all those pages and he creates some sort of like a scheme, seeing exactly what's the big title, what's the subtitle, and what sort of parts go within that. So he needs to see, let's say, the index, sort of, and see exactly what fits in where. And that sometimes is a bit more difficult to see that if everything is just written without any sort of section. If do I make myself understood? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Um,
So I think the useful things would be to sort of show, okay, this is the most important. This is like the big title, how to play, or I don't know, components. And then of course you have the components, but then you have how to play. And then you have second section, how to start, first round, or something like that. And then cleaning phase, and then within the cleaning phase maybe you have different steps. So this just doing like a hierarchy basically. And I think that's one of the things that when a designer gets that, a graphic designer gets that, it's the most useful to know how everything will be displayed.
Nice. Yeah. Also, I'll just apologize on air. For Queen of Spies, which Meeple Foundry did for us, we put in a lot of just tabletop simulator screenshots for the examples.
But that's useful, it's still useful.
Oh man.
Because in
Um,
that case, then those examples can be reproduced as examples. So for example, that is much more useful than just having a written example, because the visual is there. So the graphic designer knows already where everything needs to be placed because you've done that, rather than just having a five sentences of you do this and that player does that and they get these points and whatever. So it's good, it's not bad, it's not bad.
okay, so I've been curious about this since I'll ask more about Queen of Spies and specifically later, just because it's kind of fun for me to know. But so the other thing that's sort of interesting about this is, so y'all will get say a prototype that's in English, and English rules too for a game that's being published will change. So like, at what point after getting the rules do you translate them? And then how do you keep the versions together without making too much of a mess?
Well, first of all, everything by the time that it comes to us, even if it's from a prototype, everything should be as close as possible to final, if not 100% final.
Mhm.
So if we have received, for example, in the past, some games that we've done and they were not completely finalized, or maybe they will not fully tested, or maybe they will not, oh, this might suffer some changes. No, it shouldn't. Because when we receive something, we calculate, for example, number of pages of a rule book based on what we have and the structure and how everything is placed. So if you end up moving things around, that's double work. So everything should be as close as possible to final, if not 100%, when the graphic designers receive that. When it comes to translation, that needs to be 100% closed, like 100% finished. There should be absolutely no changes by the time the translator gets that. Why? Because by the time that translator gets that, the game should be finished. So generally the step is prototype, of course the editing, by the editor, they can change theme or do some finding on the rulebook or whatever. Then it's the, let's say, the artistic part, and that can be only the illustrator first and then the graphic designer, or preferably at the same time, because in that way they can merge their work and make it as cohesive as possible. So preferably if both work at the same times and in tandem, that would be ideal. And only when they have finished, that means when the product is finished, the game is finished, then the translator comes into place. Yeah,
Interesting.
that's generally how it works. Sometimes if you do, if you publish, for example, a game both in two languages at the same time, yes, maybe the final tweaks of the graphic designer can be here and there, but ideally it should be finished and then the translation is being done. So actually, when a publisher or when somebody's planning, they should always leave some time. And that's something, actually, that's a problem. And that is always that generally the translation has very little time,
Mhm.
because nobody considers that. When it comes to creating the time frames.
Yeah. What is the most challenging board game translation project you've ever done?
Okay, so the hardest translation that I've done was Barrage, actually. And that it was my first one, actually. And it was the most difficult because I suspect that the English was not perfect. So that was taken from the original, which was in Italian, and that was
Mhm.
translated into English. And then
Right.
I received the English and I needed to put that in Spanish. And some of the sentences were really, really strangely built up and they didn't sound really good in English. They didn't sound natural. So there were some sentences that I couldn't properly understand them. So for me, it was a very big frustration because not understanding them, I wouldn't be able to translate them. So that was definitely the most difficult. I cried a bit. So yes, Barrage was the most difficult for me.
Yeah. When you when there is a misunderstanding, like I mean, I guess you just have to write the publisher and ask what they meant.
Yes, the thing is that sometimes the chain is quite long. So generally the translator doesn't have the contact of the main publisher. So
Right.
the translator will need to write to the, in this case, Spanish publisher, and then they will need to pass on that question. And then it depends on how fast they answer. Maybe the publisher doesn't know that, and they need to ask the designer. So that sometimes is a really long chain. So what I've done in the case of Barrage, because the original was in Italian, I managed to get the Italian rulebook, and then I kind of tried to understand what the Italian meant, and
Yeah.
then being friends with some Italians, I was like, okay, what does this sentence really mean? So I tried to find like faster solutions, but it was not easy, and I couldn't contact directly the publisher nor the designer, of course.
Right. Oh, that's tough. And I take it Italian is not one of the 5
No,
languages you know?
I wish, but it was not at that time.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, Spanish and Italian are close, but they're not that close. Uh,
Exactly.
so, kind of speaking of, language sounding natural and,
Mhm.
wanting that kind of human touch for interpretation, um, you know, um, one thing that I've noticed when talking to other friends who are translators, and also like as a former classroom teacher who got out of the classroom right as ChatGPT was becoming so standard use in classrooms that it was making me really frustrated. Um, you know, do you think that AI is a threat to translators' jobs right now? And I guess just how do you feel about the situation in general?
I think the question cannot be really raised as generally speaking, in the
Yeah.
sense of, um, so both, let's say, even before AI, even before ChatGPT, we had Google Translate, right?
Yes, we did. Mhm.
And in some languages, Google Translate worked really well, and in others didn't. Why? Because that's based on texts that are already used. So there are certain combinations of languages that they're very frequent. Spanish and English is one of the most frequent ones. So, of course, everything that is AI based, Google Translate, ChatGPT, any other that might come in, they are, as the day pass by, more and more perfect because they have more text to be taken off. That is as a rule, so that would make us think that is more perfect, and therefore the jobs may be in some trouble for the translators that do generally do English into Spanish or vice versa, right? Now we have to think that if the all this AI based technology is taking what is created, it will also take things that the AI itself has translated.
Mhm.
So, for example, a small mistake that might be not seemed as a really big thing because you may understand the sentence or the paragraph or the text or the books or the article, as it progresses, small mistake by small mistake, it will end up growing big. So, actually, something that has been improved, if it's only based on other AI related or translated text, I personally think it will end up having more mistakes because the base of the AI will not be human. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that case, we will end up coming back to the humans because they will need to do maybe not translation but proofreading, like a really heavy proofreading. That's for the languages that I think they are mostly used, with more frequency. When it comes to other combination of languages, I think they're not in danger because, especially because of that, they don't have enough text, like mother text to
Yeah.
base their um, you know, uh, mechanics or engine on. So I think there is change, and I think we, the translators, will need to adapt to certain things. And I think the most frustrating is trying to make the clients and I'm not talking about board games, but just in general,
Yeah.
clients understand that humans are still necessary.
Yeah.
So, yes, we as users can use these sort of AI tools to translate a web page or translate things that we just want to get information of. But if we need to do something professional, we should not rely on AI.
As a Latinist, I definitely agree because I saw some crazy stuff come out of student homework, especially during the pandemic when they were all at home on the computer.
Oh, yes, indeed, indeed. So I think there will be a transition. I understand the worrying
Yeah.
if somebody does this on a daily basis and their mortgage depends on it. I understand the worrying, but I personally don't think we will be fully replaced.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, I would obviously I prefer the human touch, but that's also because when you are picking which word you choose and like how the words are arranged and all that matters too. Like languages aren't one to
Absolutely.
one. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in board games it doesn't work because of the terminology and everything that I used to tell you. So I don't think it will ever work.
so after you translate a game into Spanish, do you also test it with Spanish testers to make sure that everybody is like playing right?
I
Like
wish
how does everybody check that everything made it parallel in the right way?
actually I wish I could test it, but it's never you'd never have time for that. You'll always rushing so much that if you're lucky enough, you will have time for one or two proofreaders to have a look at your work. But
Mhm.
you will never have time to do that. First of all, because nobody will bother to put your work, your translated work, into either a rule book or cards or a board and then play test it with more people. So
Mhm.
nobody will do that work. Second of all, there's never enough time. And then, as I said, what we used to do is we always used to have somebody that would proofread, either one or two or even three people, depending on the text and the sort of game. If it's very specialized in something, in a special theme, um, we would try to have as many people as possible. But that's the maximum you can do, and then just give it to somebody that has never seen it and take it as like firsthand. That's the only thing you can do. To be realistic, you don't have time to test it.
I mean, fair enough. So, okay, I don't know if this is too general a question, but I'm gonna try anyway because I'm just curious. So I'm very lucky in the sense that I speak English. Unfortunately, it's only English, but most board games are catering to my language audience. So I get to see most board games. I have easy access to most board games. What does the Spanish board game market look like? How big is the variety of games that are getting translated into Spanish right now? And like, what markets are driving that?
I would say it's very big. I would say that most of the most well-known English games they're translated into Spanish and they're brought into Spanish. Back in the day when we started, the timeline between an English launch or the let's say the original launch and then the Spanish one could be maybe even a year. Nowadays, it's maybe a few months. Back in the day, I don't know, 2018, 2019, you would go to Essen to the Spiel, you would get a game in English because you knew that would take a year maybe to get into Spanish. Nowadays, sometimes you go to the Spiel, you visit the Spiel, and the week after, it's already announced that it's going to be coming in Spanish in 2 months. So actually, we're very lucky that we are having most games, or let's say most mainstream or well-known games in Spanish. It's There are a lot of publishers and they're bringing a lot of the let's say most hype games, they're bringing those into Spanish. So yeah, I think maybe it's more difficult to get indie games or less mainstream, or maybe a game that has a really good production but maybe it's not that well known, so the cost is too high for that
Mhm.
to be brought into Spanish. But I would say that most of the well-known games there are in Spanish. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like my Spanish is very bad, but the Spanish that I know because I'm from Texas is, basically Spanish from Mexico. I know that Spaniards speak it differently, and that there are other dialects throughout Latin America. So
Mhm.
I guess my question is, so if it's like an American English versus British English thing, it's pretty easy to just jump. Is worldwide Spanish like similar enough that whatever you translate will just be fine in any country in Latin America?
For board games, I would say so. You need to be careful with certain words that maybe here in, let's say, in Spain, we use it differently than in certain countries in South America. So you would want to avoid the use of certain terms because they mean a different thing there. But other than that, if you're just focusing, your question on board games,
Yeah.
generally speaking, it's fine. Um, I've never seen actually a board game being translated in one of the Latin American, let's say, countries,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. I have seen that happening with Portuguese, for example. So the Portuguese from Portugal is quite different from the one from Brazil. So I have seen, um, different board games with either Portuguese from Brazil or, specified. But in Spanish, I've never encountered that. So I think if you're just a bit more careful on how you put some words into place, I think it should be fine. Or at least that's on my experience, not only as a translator, but as a vivid player. I love
Yeah,
games, so I consume a lot. Mm.
that's awesome. So kind of swinging it back around to Queen of Spies. Queen of Spies was done in Spanish and English at the same time.
Mhm.
So, basically we handed things off to Gonzalo and then we got a magical game back like a few months later. What did it look like while David and I had just like sent the game to college or whatever?
And how did you find that? Was it like a good surprise for you, or?
Yeah, it was great. Like, we sent our ugly prototype over and then suddenly it came back and it was beautiful. So
Okay, so you were happy with it?
absolutely yes.
I'm glad to know that, because I wanted to ask you, how are you feeling now as a designer of board games? Um, but yeah, I'll ask you that in a minute, just to answer
Yeah.
your question. Well, I think that's the magic that Gonzalo does also, because he, of course, the editor, that's a very important figure, and they're the ones taking big decisions when it comes, especially to components and sizes and materials and things that are being used. So in that case, he takes some decisions that we already receive, and that's the starting point for us. So for example, it may be, in this case of Queen of Spice, it was, for example, the art inspiration. So the idea of that, he came up with that and he discussed with Samu, and he was like, oh, what do you think of this? I think this would suit really well. Oh yes, this would suit really well. And then it ended up everything merging really good together. And then it's also a matter of feedback between them, and then Samu would also filter what I mentioned before. He would, in that case, filter as, as the art direction towards Carlos, and then they worked really well together to make sure that, for example, certain iconography would be drawn instead of being flat.
Yeah.
So that's, I would say, one of the very big advantages of working at Meeple Foundry as a team, because we do it in the most possible professional way, not only for the publisher or the designer, but for the people that will have the game in their hands. So we always have them in mind. So instead of just doing a flat icon, someone would be like, oh, Carlos, what if you draw an icon like this and this represents this? And then it would be applied in this way. So it's a matter of, let's say, juggling is like a tennis, you're at the tennis court and the ball is coming back and forth. And it's at the end of the day, it's a nice match because the result of it is very cohesive. So I hope you're happy with the result. You and
Very much.
David.
Actually, one of the best parts about becoming a game designer is seeing how much interacting with artists and graphic designers makes your game better. Because you take it as far as you can. you do the best that you can with your prototype. And David is definitely more, he's better at graphic design and Photoshop and all that stuff than I am. My cards are like super plain, like way more plain than things that David makes. But even so, like, we get it as far as we can, and then it's really great to see, I guess, a professional interpretation of what we're doing. And like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it changes mechanisms a little bit even to like make, the graphic design work well with the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um and I sort of feel like it's just like adding a teammate. Like, when you add art and graphics, you're adding another designer almost to the project,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because
nice.
how y'all think about the game makes the game better and like into what it's supposed to be at the end of the process.
Oh, that's it's a very interesting and nice perspective of you, seeing this. And I think I agree with you in certain ways. And the biggest difference is when the director of the orchestra, let's say, in which in this case is Gonzalo, he allows you on what to do, on how much you can do,
Yeah.
on how many ideas he accepts, because there are other maybe editors or publishers that are, a bit more like, this is what you need to do and you cannot come up with ideas. But in that case, I think it's very interesting because, as you say, it gives up a bit over. And I've never seen it this way, that you've mentioned it. And for us, some people sometimes they ask us, oh, with so much experience that you have, you've done 170 games or around that number. They say, why don't you design a game? And we say, we could never design a game, never. We play a lot, we love games, we worked on them, and we play a lot of games that we don't do,
Yeah.
but we could never design a game. So we think that that's something that we really admire, and we think that that's something really difficult. So seeing this perspective from you is really interesting to me personally.
Yeah. I mean, y'all are at least developers. We can't do it without you. the it's no, it's really, really wonderful. Like, one thing I think that people don't, I've been very lucky, I think, because Gonzalo and Kevin, and also working at Leaders, so getting to work directly with Kyle and now whoever we have next, being able to work directly with artists is really wonderful, because I think that it helps me understand how people see my work, and
Hmm.
also how to improve things that aren't right, or that
Hmm.
could be better. So it's
Good.
it's
So
a
we're all
really
growing.
necessary it's a really
Sure.
necessary part of the process to me. Like, I would really, really sad to work on a game where I never got to interact with the artist at all.
Okay. Well, I'm happy that you're happy, and that you take it as also like a learning process for yourself. So it's a very nice view from your end, and I'm sure you will be coming with very interesting things up in the future. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely work with y'all again. It was great. So hopefully many projects.
Yes.
So Meeple Foundry has expanded. So it started with just you and Samu, and then it
Hmm.
grew to encompass art and illustration and also 3D modeling.
Hmm.
Um, what drove that growth? And then also, do you think, I mean, it's, so when publishers come to you, they don't have to use every aspect of your services,
That's
but
correct.
is
Mhm.
it, I guess, better to just put the whole game through y'all's system?
Well, it depends. It doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be better. So, what has come up with this growth, I think it was our eagerness for better games. So we have had, for example, people coming to us with CVs and expertise as illustrators or graphic designers or even translators, and they've sent us their CV, and I love board games and I would love to work with you. And the thing is that for us, we never meant to grow when it comes to doing more games, because then you lose control of things.
Yeah.
So we always wanted to be in control. So for us, the most important aspect was to have each team member specialized in something, and that would be their expertise. So when we started with Samuel, it was just translation and graphic adaptation, because those were the games, we just wanted to do, um, to be able to reach, let's say, more public. And then we also did a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, for example, where you would only have the original and then maybe a stretch goal with Spanish and things like that. So that worked for for us at that time. And then a company like a publisher reached to us, and they said, "Oh, would you be able to do a prototype, like a game from a prototype?" And we said, "Okay, we could." And then we had Andrea and Carlos coming in. We actually know them, so everything kind of aligned at the same time. And then, of course, progressing, which is the most recent member, is David. He does the 3D, and we worked with him on rulebooks. So, of course, if you are able to have examples in the rulebook that are 3D, those will look amazing. So this growth in the team, let's say, was to make a better product, not to make more games, but to make better games, or as good as we could.
Yeah.
Because yes, we could have hired, for example, more graphic designers, more illustrators, more translators, just to have more on our portfolio. But then we still needed to be on top of those, and we had no time. I think that's what we struggle with the most, is timings with the projects. So for us, it was the most important was, okay, if we do things, let's do them right. And if we put our name on something, we need to be proud of it.
Yeah, definitely. So for people who are looking for localization partners and translation partners for their games, obviously, if it's in Spanish, we should just go to you. But when you are having those conversations, like let's say that you're like a small publisher or you've independently published your game and you want to see if you can get it translated. What kinds of conversations are important to have with potential partners? And how do you like what are some things that you need to establish to make sure that it's like a good working relationship?
You mean from from the publisher perspective or from the translator perspective?
Your perspective, since you're the
Okay.
translator, but
I think that I do have a more than one perspective.
yeah, yeah,
Because besides being a translator, I do my, let's say, my 8 hours a day of work is actually as an export and licensing manager for Devir. So I touch base with the publishers from all around the world that want to publish the games that Devir does and that Samuel, for example, does with the graphic design.
yeah,
So in that case, I have all the different perspectives, let's say, and it comes with the different ends of business. But I think that the most important is, if you are a publisher and you want your game to be published in as many languages as possible, the best advice is make the files as easy as possible. Just as what I was saying before, when you asked the designer what they should deliver to the graphic designer,
right.
is make it as easy as possible. In that sense, what I mean is try to make the files in the most comprehensive way possible, because if you want for your game to be localized, you will probably want it to be localized not only in different languages as such, like with a Latin alphabet, but probably also in languages that have a different alphabet. So you need to make sure that they will be able to work on their files properly and they will not encounter difficulties. Or when the graphic designer, like your publisher, you're hiring a graphic designer, just make sure that they do things right, like with the InDesign and the packaging and the links, and everything is well connected. So when somebody receives those files, it can be easy for them. We have received in the past files that we were meant to do a graphic adaptation that come to us in PowerPoint. How did they publish that game? How did they print the game based on a PowerPoint? We have no idea. And
That hurt me physically when you said that.
how they did it, I have no idea. We told the Spanish publisher at that time, we said, look, we can do it, but we don't want you to risk your money with the manufacturer, because we don't know how this is going to be printed. You're going to risk thousands of euros, and we don't know how this is going to be printed because it's in PowerPoint. So we said, yeah, we can do it, but do you want to risk it? Better not. So They said, okay, let's ask the main publisher to do things properly and not deliver us a PowerPoint. um, and they needed to hire a new graphic designer and do everything again in InDesign so they can license it. So why don't just do it right from the first moment? Because it's a bit more expensive, yes, but it's worth it if you want to publish it in different languages and get licensing fees.
Wow.
That hit you hard, huh?
Yeah, I just can't. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah. That was the one I think that we struggled with the most, and we received it. I was like, oh no, we're not doing this.
Yeah. So basically, clear communication, clear files.
Yep.
um, how much time is it reasonable to allow? So you mentioned that at the end of a project, you never have enough time. Like, how
Mhm.
short a window are we talking? And then, how short does the window have to be before you'll just say no? Like, I can't.
Well, I think it's a matter of how big the game is. So you need to make sure that it's properly calculated based on the size of the game. So if it's, I don't know, let's say a barrage or like a really huge game, and then they tell you, oh, you need to do the graphic design of a game like this in a month. That's definitely a no, because
Yeah.
it's impossible. So I think that's more on the editor side to calculate well and to measure well the timings. But it's definitely not something that you should be rushing on, because yes, you can do things, but the more you rush on, the more probability you have that you're going to mess up with something.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So the most important, I think, is the size of the game. And then, of course, how much you allocate to the illustration and then to the graphic design. The translation, that's always allocated very little, I can tell you, and I'm sure that cannot be changed. But for illustration and graphic design, is something that time should be really taken in consideration, because also when you don't rush, the professional in charge has enough time to kind of like make a, you know like they think about it and they see it with different eyes, and the more you advance with it, the more you see it and the better you see it, and you'll understand how things can be fixed. So if you do it calmly, it's much better than if you do it in a rush and then you just use things maybe wrongly, or you don't explain the rule book well, or you maybe forget a paragraph that's very important, or things like that. So times should be measured in a good way, because at the end of the day, you as a publisher, if you rush and you mess up with something, you're going to publish a game that's a lot of like a big cost for you, not only in production, but you still need to pay the designer anyway, you will still need to pay the manufacturer anyway, you still need to pay the shipping anyway. So why would you risk all those payments and then have the game being distributed and published in, let's say, just one country, maybe in English, but then people will not like it? You will end up with games in a warehouse,
Yeah.
bad reviews on BGG, and just bad fame, let's say. So why would you jeopardize your own work and your own effort, your own money? Just allocate it the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. So, kind of as we're reaching the end of our hour, I want to ask: so, which of y'all's games that Meeple Foundry has worked on are you the most proud of? And also, what are some other games that y'all have not worked on that you think are beautiful?
Ooh, that we think we're pretty and we admire. Oh, there are so many. We recently, let's say quite recently, we played Harvest. We think that's so beautiful and so well done. Not only the art, but the graphic design is so well done, that we would love to see more games being done like that. We have lately we have tried Fromage, and we really like also the production. I think that's done really well, and we can feel that it's well thought. um Generally speaking, we really like the productions by IV Studio.
Hmm.
We used to work with them in the past. We done some translation for them for their Kickstarter campaigns a few years ago, and they do amazing work. And we think one of the main reasons is because they come from a very graphic background.
Yeah.
They used to be like a division within like a marketing, advertising sort of agency, I think it was, and then they kind of branched out, a couple of the guys, and started with IV Studio, and probably now they're more in the team. But you can really see that they know how to do stuff. And when we received their files, those were amazing. And then what else that we really enjoyed? Let me ask Samu, that's next to me. Lately, something very, very beautiful that we very much enjoyed. Something that we enjoyed very much, both artistically and as play, was Pagan. No, Pagan is really well done. We really like it. And then games that we're proud of, that what we've
Yeah.
done. I would say all, but sounds cheesy.
That's
um,
okay.
so I will just maybe focus on the games where we have done illustration and graphic design, such as, for example, Queen of Spies. We're very, very, very happy with the outcome because we think artistically looks very different from what you're having launched nowadays. We also really like how Operation Barclay came out, also by Salt and Pepper Games. And then, of course, we're very proud of games that are more mainstream, that we haven't done the artwork on, but the graphic design, such as the White Castle, for example. So we're very proud of that because it has a lot of exposure. But then, if we also look at smaller games, there is one that's been done for a Spanish publisher. It's called Feliz No Cumpleaños, which is happy no birthday, or
Yeah. I was like,
I don't
that's a
know.
no. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's coming from Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, a merry
So
unbirthday. Yeah.
Mary on Birthday, that's it. So
Yeah.
that would be how it's in the movie. And this is actually an adaptation of King's Up, of a game that's quite well known. And this is a game that it's Alice in Wonderland based, very fun, family oriented. And we did it for a small Spanish publisher. So to kind of give you like an to resume or to give you an overview, we like working with big companies, likewise with indie companies or smaller publishers. And we like to treat them the same way, and we like to treat the games the same way. So we give the same professionalism in both.
Yeah.
And this is something that we as a team were very proud of, to be able to work with maybe people that are starting in the industry, or a small company, and then big companies. um so yeah, I think that was a very long answer, but
No, that's okay. I like long answers. I'm a podcaster. And then so if people want to follow your work online, where is the best place to find you?
yes, so the best would be Instagram, because there's where we update the most, and that's going to be Meeple Foundry, at Meeple Foundry. Just that's it. We also have our webpage that we update with the projects that we work on, but on the webpage you have no interaction. And on Instagram we do have some more interaction, and then we publish a lot of stories, and even on projects that we haven't worked on, but maybe we've seen something really cool in a game and we like to share that. And we play a lot, so we also like to show what we play, and because we always learn also from the work that others do. So yes, follow us on Instagram and interact with us, and tell us your favorite games. And when we publish things on stories, we always have questions or interaction, so so they can do that.
Perfect. Deanna, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so fun to get to talk to you about what you do. Like, obviously, I've benefited from what you do, but I feel like I appreciate it even more now.
Oh, thank you, Liz. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you once again for inviting me over here. I hope I did it well. I'm not that
Definitely.
much used to it, but I hope it was entertaining also for everybody who's listening. And yes, if anyone has any question about something, just feel free to drop us a line. Maybe if you visit the webpage, we may seem like a big company. It's just a few of us, and we're very reachable. So feel free to drop a line. And once again, Liz, thank you also for the work that you've done on Queen of Spice and all the feedback and everything that you've mentioned and all the interactions that you've had also with Samu and with Carlos. We're very happy of the result, and we hope you are as well.
Definitely, definitely. All right, everybody out there, please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, and most of all, happy gaming.